So Rabbi Shmuley Alton here from the Jewish Learning Institute. Welcome, everyone. It gives me great pleasure to welcome everyone to another Jewish Fireside Chat. Thank you for joining us here on Zoom and on YouTube. I see some regular faces and some new people. Welcome, everyone. We're excited about tonight. Before we begin, I want to just thank those who sponsor this evening and everyone who partners with us in our work of connecting the wisdom and light of Torah with the hearts and minds of so many. Before we begin, the topic of tonight's Fireside Chat is disability and inclusion. So before we begin with the formal program, I want to just share with you a very short story that I came across earlier today. And I'm going to read it to you. It's a beautiful story. And this will hopefully set the tone for tonight's subject. In the summer of 1976, a large group of IDF veterans who were in New York came to meet with the Lubavitcher Rebbe. These were soldiers who had been wounded in battle, lost limbs, many in wheelchairs. The Rebbe then gave a fascinating talk to the soldiers. One of the points was when the Rebbe made the suggestion to replace the term disabled, which he did not approve of, with the term exceptional. As he explained, the painful, restrictive lifestyle which the soldiers find themselves in is an indicator of the deeply incredible spiritual strength they possess. So exceptional was a term that would be more fitting and more accurately describe the individual. In Hebrew, it's called mitsuyanim. Joseph Kabalov, a soldier who had both his legs amputated, was at this meeting. He describes in an interview how at the end of the meeting, each soldier received $1 with parting words from the Rebbe, and that to him, the Rebbe said, "Thank you." Somehow, he said, the Rebbe sensed that that was exactly what I needed to hear. With those two words, the Rebbe erased all the bitterness and despair that had accumulated in my heart. I carried the Rebbe's thank you back to Israel, and I carry it with me to this very day.
Thank you, Rabbi Shmuley. All right, so my name is Adina Altain. I do see some new faces, so thank each and every single one of you for joining us here this evening. Welcome to the JLI family. We're so happy that you joined our program tonight, and we of course encourage you to check out everything that we're doing throughout the rest of this lovely season and year. Excuse me. So tonight, excuse me one second. Elaine, has that ever happened to me before? Not usually. I don't have COVID, I don't think. Oh no. Okay, just kidding. Poor joke. So tonight's Fireside Chat is actually very precious and dear to my heart. It's the first time that both our presenters are Winnipeggers. So this is unique for our Fireside Chat here. And one of my kind of favorite things about being in a position of leadership is that I'm able to have the opportunity to interview and meet hidden gems that are really uniquely talented individuals. And I've been able to sometimes even be a part of the growth of these individuals being able to find their inner greatness. So tonight we have a chance to meet two of these special gems, two Jewish leaders who are taking their field by storm. So when I was looking for my childcare staff, I was looking for an aftercare staff, and I was going through my stack of resumes on my desk. I was sitting next to my colleague. This is Chana Heidesfeld. Okay, I heard a little echo there. So I was sitting next to my colleague, and I come across this name, Melissa Shapiro. And it looks really impressive. She has other childcare background. She's a student. And I pull out the name and I say, Chana, do you know, have you heard this name? And Chana goes to me like this, wow. This girl actually was my preschool student. When I taught at Chabad years ago in the North End, she was my student. And she continued to tell me that this girl is one talented go-getter. And then she said, nothing gets in Melissa's way. And if I want someone who will get a job done, no matter what, Melissa's my girl. So I don't know, I think she's still in the dark, our sweet Melissa. Melissa, show yourself. Our sweet Melissa has come full circle, actually. And for the last couple of years, she joined the team at Chabad to teach in the very preschool that nurtured her, that she herself was taught in. And Melissa consistently gives back to our community, from the littlest, youngest members. She teaches now in the Aleph Bet daycare as well. She's doing her practicum in our very own JCFS. That's all in addition to her passion for photography and makeup, this spunky, awesome gal. And Melissa is truly an example of treating every human with warmth and a smile, and teaching all of us how to embrace every individual, because every person is precious. So Melissa, it's no wonder that your Hebrew name is Matana. You are a true gift to us and to our community. And take it away. You'll introduce our next speaker as well. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Dina. I appreciate how my connection to Chabad and everything has just come full circle within the last few years. It's very special to me as well. So hi, everybody. Welcome to tonight's Fireside Chat. I'm very excited to be a part of this. And yes, so tonight we'll be having a discussion about disability and inclusion. That's very close to my heart as well, because I was born missing my arm. And so I had to live and experience education myself through the lens of other people. So leading our discussion tonight is Mr. Michael Baker, who is a Manitoba educator and Ph.D. student, and consultant and advocate. So Michael, please take it away.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for coming. First, I want to give a shout out to our dear friend.
Debut.
What?
I'm sorry, we just wanted to make a grand debut. You know, if we'd be in person, like the curtains would open now, dun da da da, and introducing the Fireside Chat star, Mr. Michael Baker. Put your hands together, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, I'm going on mute now.
Okay, now for my shout out. I wanted to give a shout out to our dear friend Naomi Rotter. It's her birthday today. She's turning 40. No, wait, maybe the first number is wrong, but I know it's her birthday today, so I wanted to give her a big shout out before we start. Okay.
Back.
So I'm going to introduce our moderator, Melissa, here. Just so although Adina did a fantastic job with her background, but I am going to read a little bit about her, what she's formally working on and an experience that she had to kind of set the tone. So Melissa is a third-year student completing a Bachelor of Social Work at Booth University College. Her passion for helping others is what led her to the field of social work. Melissa was born missing her arm and was enrolled in the War Amps Champs, or Child Amputee program, that seeks to empower child amputees to accept their amputation. The years of learning tips and tricks from other amputees in the War Amps inspired Melissa's desire to do the same for the next generation. Melissa was approached by CBC in 2015 to highlight her high school basketball playing journey. This sparked Melissa's dream of being a role model for younger amputees, as the lack of representation of amputees in fashion, sports, TV shows, and movies is limited. Melissa wants to empower and inspire people to be unapologetically themselves, and hopes to use her social work background to advocate for those with disabilities. And so me and Melissa actually share a commonality with that in terms of our advocacy work. Okay, so now I'm going to attempt to share my screen here. Okay, everyone got that? Okay, so who am I? Well, I am an educator. I work with students with profound intellectual and multiple disabilities in high school. I'm also a Ph.D. student at the University of Manitoba in the Faculty of Education. My focus is on disability studies and education. And I also am a consultant, and I recently did some consulting for the Canadian Museum for Human Rights on disability subjects for schools. I've also written a lot of articles, gone to a lot of presentations throughout North America, including the recent one in Hawaii, where I spoke about my research that I did actually with Manitoba high schools in terms of what sensory learning. And so quite recently, actually, last week, I wrote an article that was published in the National Post. It has over 1,400 readers currently, and it's advocating for students with disabilities to have the option of in-person learning during school closures. And so my advocacy is not only in the field of education, but also in the wider disability community. And before I get too far into it, I also wanted to add a disclaimer that what I'm going to talk about tonight is not necessarily indicative of all the entire disability community. I don't speak for the entire disability community. I simply speak for myself. The second thing I want to say is when we talk about disability, we're going to talk about it in a general term, in a broad term. But I think it's important to highlight that there's a lot of diversity within the disability community. And so I wanted to pay tribute to that, just to keep that in mind, that as we continue to talk about disability and the disability community as if they're one single entity, the truth is that it's not. Although it is a social identity, there's a lot of variation within disability. So our guiding questions for tonight will be, in 2020, what do we mean when we say normal? And where does normal come from, right? How does normal apply to schooling and education? What is inclusion and why it's important today? And why you should care about disability as it pertains to a variety of areas in life, including Jewish life. And what you can do to make a change. So normal, what is it and why is it here? When we speak about normal, what we're actually really speaking about is the industrialization process. So we're speaking about making a common denominator across everybody. So when industrialization occurred, they took a look and said, what could the majority of human beings do to work on an assembly line? And that kind of birthed the idea of normal. So a common denominator between all people. The term also has baggage from psychology. And so in psychology, it refers to a common behavior for an individual or amongst a society. And then that can be considered normal. Today, when we say abnormal or not normal, what we're really saying is that it goes outside a commonality, or at least a perceived commonality or a universal experience. It's out of the blue and it seems odd. The more we experience something, the more normal it becomes. And so today, disability portrayed in the media across a lot of sectors is considered as almost abnormal. And what I'm going to show you is that's actually not true. That's something that we are continually sold to perpetuate a certain reality. So disability is an issue that affects all of us. In 2017, the Canadian Survey on Disability showed us that 1 in 5 Canadians, or approximately 6.2 million individuals, had a disability. In the United States, it was the CDC reported 1 in 4, or approximately 61 million adults have a disability in the United States. And yet, 60% of all discrimination by the Canadian Human Rights Commission is disability related. And so what that actually is showing us is that although disability is portrayed as abnormal, disability is portrayed as an other, it is removed. Although, we talk about inclusion, or accessibility, and a lot of those things have to do with, physical forms. But what these statistics actually show us is disability is more normal, is more prevalent than a lot of things that we perhaps take for granted. And so this is called in academics, it's called social constructionism. So we actually socially construct our environment to suit a need. And so when we think about disability, we're constantly sold this idea that it's us versus them. It's the inclusion of people with disabilities versus those that are normal. And these statistics show us that perhaps disability is more normal than many other things across the board. And this directly translates to employment. People with disabilities are between the ages of 25 and 64 have a 23% make up low income, when compared to only 9% of people without disabilities. And much of this has to do with discrimination, coming back to the Canadian Human Rights Commission. People with disabilities are portrayed as, again, something that is not okay within society, something that is feared, and that's simply not true. But when we're talking about disability, what are we actually speaking about? Are we speaking about people with physical disabilities or intellectual disabilities? What kind of disability are we speaking of? In disability studies, there is a distinct difference between disability and impairment. So disability is actually the way society disables an individual or discriminates against an individual. So although we use the term disability as almost a slang to refer to everybody with an impairment, disability is actually the act of discrimination. It is the way in which we discriminate against people with atypical bodies and minds. And this is called the social model of disability that deviates between disability and impairment. Whereas it comes from this idea of the medical model of disability that says that all impairment and all disability is within the individual, and it is up to the individual to overcome all obstacles. It's up to them. It's not up to society. Why? Because the argument goes that people with disabilities are the outliers. There's not very many of them. They're a small minority group. And today, that's false. Today, the disability community is the largest minority group in the world with over 1.4 billion people. So when we talk about the thing about normal, disability is normal. And disability affects all of us. And, so this kind of line of argumentation anymore doesn't hold up. So when we talk about schooling, what does disability have to do with schooling, and where does it come from? So our schooling system is actually an offshoot of the industrial process. So the whole idea of the assembly line and the worker fitting a certain need, our school is actually structured exactly the same way. If you want to learn more about that, you can easily look up Sir Ken Robinson. He has a great short YouTube video explaining that process. The philosophy of inclusion in Manitoba highlights certain things, which is on your screen here. They highlight that inclusion is a way of thinking. It leads to access and benefits of citizenship. In Manitoba, apparently we embrace inclusion as a means of enhancing the well-being of the entire community. Apparently we work together to strengthen the capacity for a richer future for us all. That promotes participation and belonging. But do we really promote participation and belonging? And if inclusion is a way of thinking, what exactly do we think about? In Canada, education is streamlined into different sectors that will promote an academic vocation or an academic pursuit, a college vocation or a college pursuit, and people with disabilities. What happens is a student comes in with a disability, and perhaps it is an intellectual disability. If they partake of what's called individualized programming, the student is able to stay in high school until age 21, but cannot earn any high school credits, no matter how many courses they take, no matter how well they do in the class. They're barred from taking classes like their peers and earning those credits. So although they can sit in a class and do all the work and perhaps score a quality mark in a class, they will never receive credit for that, and they will not graduate from high school in Canada. They do not receive a diploma. They receive a certificate of completion. If a student is deemed not to have a severe intellectual disability, but perhaps a physical disability with a learning disability, and I put that in quotes because learning disability, although in a small percentage, has shown to be real, the vast majority of learning disabilities are a systematic learning disability. They only occur in school. And in fact, I was diagnosed with a severe learning disability and was segregated to a different wing in school. And yet I'm pursuing a Ph.D. And so these type of students are called modified students. Although they can work toward credits, unlike someone in an individualized program, they can never attend university. Their credits are, stigmatized, called modified, and they are never allowed to attend university unless they attend a special program, and they will never earn credit in that institution. The only institution that they can vie for is college or the workforce. Now, many times, students with physical disabilities who have absolutely no intellectual impairment will be funneled in these two streams. And this happens rampantly in the United States, and it also occurs in Canada. And this comes back to the idea that disability is portrayed as an us versus them, a small minority, an offshoot. And so again, is this really promoting, benefit for all, active citizenship, participation? And again, coming back to it, if inclusion is a way of thinking, what exactly do we think about? Today in Manitoba education, the only time disability is discussed in a regular semestered class is when we talk about euthanasia, doctor-assisted suicide. That is the only time disability is approached, drastically correlating disability and death. Now, to remedy this idea of inclusion has two parts, an attitudinal part and a physical or accessible part. To be included, you need to be able to get in the building, and that's great. Okay, so there's a ramp, you're in the building. But if there's attitudinal barriers that prevent you from participating in anything, those physical inclusionary measures don't amount to anything. So I wrote a course called Introduction to Disability Studies that teaches quite the opposite. It teaches the idea of empowering, and it teaches really disability from a disability studies perspective and not a medical model perspective or a degrading, stigmatizing one. And in this way, hopefully, inclusion becomes more real in Manitoba. Currently, I teach that course. I've been teaching it for 3 years, and it will be the subject of my PhD dissertation in terms of attitudinal difference in the Canadian population. But it's also being picked up perhaps by another very large high school and school division in the city, and hopefully it spreads. And this is one of the things that I go around Canada and the United States talking about, is the importance of attitudinal inclusion, the importance of changing those mindsets and correlations in education. So why should you care? Well, there's the idea of rights, dignity, and value, but the biggest one I wanted to focus on today was value. We are consistently told, or consistently people with disabilities are portrayed as having a lack of value based on their economic output, based on their market participation. What I really want to challenge is the idea of human value extends beyond our standardized ideal of how much money do you make, and kind of what are your credentials. This single argument is currently the focus of Bill C8. I want to make sure it's C8, not C7. In Parliament today. It's called M.Ed, and it's doctor-assisted suicide. And the Liberal government is currently trying to push forward a very similar policy as the Nazis did, in that they allow any person with a disability whose death is not imminent to access doctor-assisted suicide without any type of health reasoning. So you have a disability, and you're depressed, or you're finding it very hard to make a living, which is actually the subject of a Maclean's article this week. You can access doctor-assisted suicide and be put to death in our Canadian hospitals simply for having a disability. This entire idea comes from the idea of value, of valuing an individual. And again, we constantly see things in the media that have to do with disability and a lack of employment and your economic output, and that correlation back to human value. And I want to portray that's human value extends far beyond your economic output and should never be the subject subjected to these type of ideals. You should also understand that there's a restitution case here. So in Canada, we institutionalize people with disabilities. Institutions continue to exist today in Canada and the United States. And for many people with disabilities, this was a life sentence simply for having a disability or Down syndrome. Any one of these books in front of you will show you that Canadians were simply institutionalized for having oh no.
Oh, Michael's computer died. He's just switching computers.
Melissa, would you like to share something?
Yeah, I mean, I could speak to a few things that he's talked about already, specifically with education. Oh, he's back. Yeah, just with education and accessibility. I think working with kids, it's a lot different, and you see that it starts with them. If they don't, like Michael says, you get used to the idea of it, and if you don't see it, then you're not used to the idea of it. It's different. That's why people have that label.
Hi, everyone. Sorry, the computer literally just died. Technology. Does everyone see this? Yes, no, maybe so?
I think you need
Only
to
seeing you.
Yeah, you have to reshare your screen.
How about now?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Just in case I wasn't able to, I think I allowed.
That's it.
Okay. No, I don't see Michael.
Can you hear me and see the screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Can hear you and can see the screen, yes.
Okay, let's continue then. Okay, so there is a restitution case to be made, and that is the recognition of harm done. And so again, as I previously said, in Canada, we institutionalize people with disabilities many times for a lifetime. And you know, when those institutions, when the majority of institutions closed down, very little restitution was made. And so, you know, I think there's a kind of a collective duty to recognize that and to do better. Without advocacy, discrimination continues. And I think as Jews and Jewish people, we all know that when we don't advocate and we don't push for greater agency and we don't push for greater rights, discrimination continues. And I think that's the only way to combat bigotry and what is today called ableism, is to continually push for more rights to limit discrimination. And the final thing, and I don't love this line of argument, but it is true, and that you should care about disability and inclusion because it'll affect you. And it'll affect you either personally, because perhaps you will get old enough to acquire a disability, or because it'll affect one of your family members, your loved ones, or someone you know. As I said, you know, we go back to those statistics. Disability affects 1 in 5 and 1 in 4 in Canada and the United States. And so if for nothing else, you should absolutely care because it will affect you. Okay, so what you can do to make a change. And that is, it's seemingly simple, but probably takes a lot of advocacy on your part. And that one is read the news every day. Inform yourself. Ask yourself, how is the news article conveying the issue? And what's the agenda? Get involved in community advocacy. And in Winnipeg, we constantly have an accessibility problem because of the changing ground. You know, sidewalks come out of whack, things heave here. And so accessibility is actually a continual issue that we should advocate to our politicians to continually maintain. Identify attitudinal or physical inaccessibility and bring it to the attention of your local politician or businessman or woman or gym, etc. And, you know, one way to do this is to, next time you go shopping, to look around at all the employees and try and, you know, and identify if anybody has a physical disability. Is disability visibly present? Now, of course, there are intellectual disabilities that you can't see, but if it affects 1 in 4 and 1 in 5, and you go to your local mall or Polo Park or the Outlet Mall or anything, and there's nobody with a physical disability in sight, you probably have a problem of attitudinal discrimination. And I love to talk about this with students because when you look across the board, there are very few teachers in a high school in Manitoba that have disabilities. And so I simply ask the question, why is that? If 1 in 4 of us have a disability, what's happening here? You don't have to do a study to see that there is a significant amount of discrimination against what we should consider a very normal part of being human. Ask questions. He's called one of the greatest philosophers of our time. His name is Peter Singer. He is a politician at Princeton. He is a utilitarianism, which you know, kind of briefly means that he believes in utility So if something doesn't have isn't effective in doing something per se, usually portrayed in the market economy, then there's no use having it. And so Peter Singer has been advocating for 30, 40 years for the killing of infants with disabilities. And although it sounds extreme, his philosophies actually have a lot of sway in triage protocols in hospitals and in medical ethics or bioethics. He holds one of the most coveted lecturing positions, and so when you're looking at articles and asking yourself questions and looking at your surroundings, you should also know, and it's more readily accessible here with COVID-19, is what are the triage protocols? And what you'll usually find is that people with disabilities are close to the bottom of the list when it comes to what some might consider scarce resources. Instead of a first come, first served triage protocol, people with disabilities and assumptions will be made about their value of life, and they will be put further down. That's a direct result of advocates like Peter Singer. So just be kind of cautious of that. Be cautious of the language you use. I recently wrote an article about the use of the R word or retarded. I've heard this used slang in high school halls, in airports, simply walking down the street. A simple change in your language actually changes the way you think. And so be cautious of language. And finally, question your own discrimination. When you think about disability, do you think about charity and pity, useless or disposable, lack of value? Although you may not do it consciously, a lot of media will portray disability in these terms. And so we constantly have to check our own discrimination. We want to make society a better place through raising social consciousness and improving societal practices. And that will help us work toward what Dr. Nancy Hansen, who's a professor at the University of Manitoba here, asserts is the normality of different bodies doing things differently. There's space in all of our institutions for people with disabilities. We simply have to, one, stop to discriminate, stop to idealize a fictional normal, and two, to embrace and empower people that we have kept down for a long time. And that's it. That's my presentation.
Thank you, Michael. We would like to take this time to do some questions, and then I think I'll jump in on some personal experiences.
That sounds great.
I have a question. So I couldn't keep my mouth shut. In the US, in the public school systems, there's actually financial incentive for labeling children as disadvantaged and disabled. Does that also happen in Canada?
Yes, it does. Yeah. An average Manitoba student to the school is about $9,000. The average Manitoba student with a diagnosed disability is $27,000. So there's a huge financial incentive.
It certainly is.
That's right.
Right. So we're paying school systems to label.
Correct. Yeah, and it also funds a huge organization of psychiatrists, psychologists, special education, which is probably what you might consider I do, also largely benefits from this type of labeling. Now, I don't want to paint a bad picture across the board. There's lots of great work to be done, but I think through highlighting our shortcomings, we can actually make the system better. So I just wanted to kind of point that out, but that's a very good point, Naomi. Thank you.
Right. Okay.
No other questions? I did kind of want to throw in, I didn't talk a lot about kind of the Jewish angle of disability, because I think it's a complicated one. I've been looking into Jewish medical ethics. You can research that. It's an entire area of study. I've actually been talking to a leader in Jewish medical ethics in the United States, because it's contested with disability. So although Jewish medical ethics and bioethics in hospitals are, I think, very forthcoming and very progressive, I would probably go out on a limb and say that Jewish schooling and disability has a lot of work to be done. I worked in Jewish schools with Jewish kids with disabilities before I moved to Manitoba, and it was a completely segregated program. It's usually stigmatized by a lack of intellectual pursuit, and I think, part of it is the idea of value and valuing people of different abilities and stuff like that. I hope I'm wrong, but I continually see things in magazines, on posts, firsthand experiences through people that says, we have a lot of work to do as well.
Okay, so I think I'm just gonna speak a little bit about what Michael had to say on like personal experiences. I guess living with a disability in a world that is not set up for us to succeed in. I guess I can just start like chronologically speaking. Growing up, I never really saw myself as any different. I went to a small elementary school, and everybody knew who I was, so I felt very accepted there. And the school was very accepting. I was basically given the chance to do everything. I was given the chance to jump rope. If there was something that was in the way, then my gym teacher would fix it for me. Juggling, dancing. I was a dancer my whole life. I learned how to swim and bike ride and all that stuff. I guess that people don't think that people with physical disabilities can do. And me and Michael were discussing kind of the notion of the label disability, and he asked me whether I consider myself a part of the disability community. And the answer to that is yes, but I don't consider myself disabled, because disabled has a connotation that it limits ability. And if you know me, then I am very abled, and I don't want that to kind of make people's impressions of me different. And when you have that label disability, people make assumptions right away before even knowing you. So I think that's speaks right to what Michael said about disability as a social construct. So yeah, then leading into, I guess, as I got older in high school, I sort of kind of, I don't know, got a little bit more insecure about it. I got upset about like long sleeve shirts and how they dangle. So I got a prosthetic arm for high school, and I wanted that to be my first impression of people. And that was even challenging in itself. You don't think of things that are kind of restrictive to people, but even so much as a door handle. Door handles that twist like this. If I'm holding things in my arms, I'll drop everything. Even door handles that go down like that, like very inaccessible things that people don't think about, but things that we have to work around every day. And so, yeah, I kind of went back a little bit on the self-confidence and thought that I needed to be like everybody else because I was the one that stood out. But then Halloween of grade 12, I decided to kind of embrace it. And I'm not sure if anybody knows Bethany Hamilton, but she is a famous surfer, and they did a movie Soul Surfer about her, and she lost her arm in a shark attack. And so I was her for Halloween. And so I had no arm. I pretended that I had a scar on it, and I wore a bathing suit, and everybody liked it. And it was like, oh, this is what I'm supposed to be. And I always like to put humor involved, and I'll always say jokes like, If people forget sometimes, because that happens, and I'll be like, but no, I have one arm, and then sometimes they get confused, and I'm just like, that's because your idea of what I'm able to do is not actually reality. And then also I realized that I was kind of visually different from when I started working with kids. Kids don't get the chance to see people with disabilities ever. I can't think of a single Disney movie or child movie that has a character with one arm. Nobody that I could look up to as a kid and kind of resonate with. And so I think that's where a lot of children are kind of stuck. And I worked with kids for many years, and every year it's a shock to see me in a position of like a teacher role because they don't have that. So I've gone to multiple different daycares in the city, and doesn't matter if it's North End or South End, they're confused and they have never seen a person like me before. And so that's kind of, yeah, it's what sparked my interest in like kind of being more like an advocate for people with disabilities. And I want to be a role model for younger generations to be able to look up to somebody that is proud of who they are and confident in themselves and doesn't worry about what other people think. And I think that if children had that mindset for themselves, then anybody can have the confidence in the world. And so, yeah, I think it's just kind of like what we teach our kids, and what they see in the media is very important because they pick up everything. And yeah, they're very curious, and they have a lot of questions, and I love answering all the questions because it just educates them, because they're not getting that education anywhere else.
That's so good that you brought up the media perspective, because I actually brought this along, and so it's an article written by The Atlantic, and it talks about Denmark's current national policy of pressuring every woman who's pregnant to get prenatal testing and abort if there's any percentage of having a child with Down syndrome. And so what they're actually doing is they're attempting to eliminate Down syndrome, but what they're really doing is just killing all the babies that have it. And this is not a policy that's only in Denmark. This is a policy that happens across Scandinavian countries and is becoming more prevalent in the United States and in Canada. And so you're right. What we do see in the media is very, very important. And Melissa, it's really great that you get out there. And I only want to encourage you to do that, because disability is as normal as ability. And, I say those kind of in quotes because I obviously think you have great ability. And it's really important to be out there. Because that's how we change. That's how society changes. The more we see something, the more we fight for it, the more normal it becomes, the more prevalent in our society it becomes. That's so thank you for sharing that. It was really great.
Yeah, of course.
Are there any other questions? I feel like I've spoken too long. It's already 50 minutes. That's
Yeah, I was just curious as to whether this professor, Peter Singer, was Jewish.
Peter Singer is Jewish, and his parents survived the Holocaust.
Amazing.
I know, it's I have no idea like his train of thought. I have all his books. His most famous book is called Why This Baby Should Die, and it was published in the 70s. It's still widely read in bioethics, and it simply makes the argument that kids with disabilities up until 3 or 4 days old, even after they've come into the world, should be killed, because it's unconscionable, but it is he is the most famous or influential philosopher of our generation, and so it's one of these things that myself and the disability community and disability studies and professors largely rally against, unfortunately. He's a driving force in medical ethics and triage protocols in the West, in Canada and the United States.
Mr. Dr. Almost Baker, this was such an insightful session. You know, I realize how much work I practically have, even in understanding, because as I'm processing this, it's really the basis of Jewish value.
Oh, absolutely.
So in our value system, it's there, but how it actually, you know, manifests in the world we live in, there's a giant disconnect with that. And I think for me, the challenge, maybe you can speak to this, maybe you have some opinion, and please excuse my I'm saying this with all sensitivity. And maybe you can help understand how we can bridge the gap. Because what I hear from what you're saying is, on one hand, there's a segment of individuals that need a different kind of support or system that is not normalized right now in the way that our system works, right? And so it's a little bit of a double-edged sword. You know, I see this even with every child is unique and different. And I'm sure we can expand, you know, when we talk about ability and disability, even within just on a tiny, tiny microcosm of, you know, people's strengths or weaknesses. And do you have any insight into, you know, how to actively create awareness or just, you know, to be I guess it's maybe in the courses that you give, but how to normalize it in a way that they're not segregated, but that we're still respectful, and we bring to light their unique needs. Because on one hand, when you're bringing to light their unique needs, it is segregating them, right? And so we're trying to get away from that to normalize it. And yet at the same time, we're trying to teach a basis of respect, no matter what a person's challenges are.
So the inclusion in education does involve place. So kids with disabilities will be in a regular classroom and receive perhaps different approaches within that classroom. But really it's about just seeing a person. Every person has their strengths and weaknesses, every person. And so instead of focusing on someone's disability, focus on the person. And you can customize and tailor a program for that individual to meet that individual's needs in environments, in any environment. It doesn't need to be a segregated program. Now, it doesn't mean that some programming can't happen outside of a particular classroom. But what it does mean is that we don't focus on a disability, we focus on a person. It's commonly referred to as person first language or perspective, although there's a community based perspective where people with disabilities prefer to use the term disability in identifying themselves. But again, it's just simply recognizing the human being. I've never worked with a student, and I've worked with students who are very profoundly disabled in our current system, the way we might think of that, and literally can take any course. I've taken a course, grade 12 physics, with a girl who is nonverbal and has Down syndrome. And we just did our own work, and we were part of the class, and it was the best class I ever had. It was so much fun, just including everybody, because everyone's got their own unique personality and their own unique strengths, that we don't need to pigeonhole people and be so bent on everybody's difference as a bad thing. We need to embrace people. And I think it comes down to that.
Yeah, one thing I do when working with young kids is I say, like, you notice my difference is having one arm. What's different about you compared to me? I'll point out maybe their hair colors are different than mine, or I wear glasses. Do you wear glasses? Like, it's just pointing out things that maybe aren't that disability. And I think in terms of social inclusion, one thing that educators can do is have like a variety of books and yeah, that have different characters, like a character in a wheelchair, or a character with Down syndrome, or all of those. Like, they exist, they're just not being utilized to their fullest potential.
All right, I think that's a wrap. Thank you. Beautiful, beautiful evening. My mind is blown. You said so many amazing ideas that I'll still need to process over the next couple of days. Anyways, first of all, Michael, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Your experience, your insight, your wisdom with us, and thank you, Matana. It's truly been a gift to have you.
Thank you.
I want to thank each and every one of you for joining tonight to our third Fireside Chat of our fall semester. And thank you, of course, to the team of Chabad and all of my colleagues for making this happen. I also want to extend an invitation to each and every one of you. This Saturday night, Motzei Shabbat, we're having a social learning program. It's called Kol Al Erev, an interactive learning experience in 5 different languages. So we have like different booklets, these little learning booklets in English, Hebrew, Russian, Spanish, and it's all based on the book of Tanya, which is a book on Kabbalah, Jewish mysticism and psychology. So it starts at 7:30 p.m. It's of course a virtual Zoom event, and we're going to have breakout sessions in each language. So small groups of learning in each language, and I want to extend an invitation to each and every one of you. Please consider joining and signing up. And as well, on Hanukkah, we're going to be hosting a watch party. So we're going to be screening a new film. It's called The Light of Fire. So it's going to be not next Wednesday, but in 2 weeks on Wednesday evening. Sorry, Tuesday night. Yes, Tuesday evening, not Wednesday. Tuesday evening, in about 2 weeks on Hanukkah, and we will light the menorah and watch this film. All of these events and programs are available on our mobile app, jli.chabadwinnipeg.org. So you could download the app or just visit the website to stay up to date, to stay current, and to stay connected. Anyways, thank you so much for joining us.
We're just finalizing now our winter schedule. So if anyone has specific feedback of a topic that you would like to discuss at a fireside chat or a course that you would like to hear more about, shoot us an email. We love your feedback. We're in the middle of talking with the rabbi in Dubai for one of our upcoming fireside chats and a sneak peek into how gefilte fish is made. My uncle runs a gefilte fish, Benzi's gefilte fish. So those are a little bit of insight in our fireside chats. And of course, we welcome you all to the Chabad family. There's donuts, there's latkes, there's a lot of pickup or delivery. The kitchen is fully functioning, the school and preschool as well. And we thank you all for joining us tonight in the JLI. And we hope that you experience some joy in Torah learning.
Thank you again, and Laila Tov. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Michael. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thanks.
Thank you.